Great counting. If we look confused tonight, our technology is not perfect, so we're scrambling just a little bit. We're going to start out by saying that this is the work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for Tuesday, October the 11th, 2022, and we are called to order, and I'm going to call the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Vice Mayor Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Hanson.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown is absent. Alderman Potts.
Present.
Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor is here too. So there's the roll call. Now's an opportunity for citizens to make comments for items that are not on the agenda. Our usual routine is there's speaker cards at that big pole in the middle of the room, and ask you to fill those out if you plan on speaking. It's the best courtesy you could offer is if you plan on speaking now, give them to me now, because we generally don't like to get them 5 minutes before we're over. So, and I have no citizen comment cards. So we'll go on to item number 1, which is Ordinance 2022-21, an ordinance to rezone 34.30 acres from Regional Commerce RC6 District to Plan PD 10.15 and a bunch of other numbers district for the property located north of Cool Springs Boulevard, east of Mac Hatcher Memorial Parkway at 211 Cool Springs Boulevard, the Optima Franklin PUD subdivision, establishing a public hearing on November 22nd, 2022. And then item 2 is a development plan, and 3 is the parkland impact fee also. So, good to see you, Joey.
Always glad to be here. This is for the new Optima Franklin PUD subdivision, which does require a rezoning to establish entitlements with the planned district base zoning. And the new plan proposes 348 attached residential dwelling units, 203,968 square feet of non-residential space, and 130 hotel room keys on a site comprising of 34.30 acres. That 203,968 figure of non-residential square feet does include approximately 138,000 square feet of commercial space at the existing NHC facility located at 211 Cool Springs Boulevard. Envision Franklin places this property in the regional commerce design concept, which states that these areas contain high-intensity activity centers that attract large numbers of people and employers from both within and outside of the city. These areas include major employment and revenue generators that are valuable community resources. The proposed development plan meets the recommendations of Envision Franklin by providing a mix of uses, including commercial, retail, housing, and hotels, and a cohesive and walkable design. A trail system at the rear of the property connects to the existing city parks trail system for access to the nearby Aspen Grove Park. The site layout provides an urban feel with building-lined streets, creating a walkable development, and provides architecture that fits in with the style of the corridor. I do want to turn over to Paul Holden to discuss more about the traffic.
Thank you, Joey. Let me see. Oh, there we go. All right, so as Joey said, we're excited about the development. With any big development, new development, there's always traffic to analyze. So what we wanted to do is just kind of walk you through a short presentation of that. The agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about the TIA guidelines that we have established. We're going to talk about examples of other development and mitigation they were required to do. And then I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk about existing level of service, background, and project level service, the safety study completed, the recommended improvements, and then Vernon's going to talk a little bit about the summary of options of how the board can proceed. So as this item went through the Planning Commission, we started to receive a lot of questions about our TIA requirements and whether that standard had changed over time or whether we had come up with new requirements. And what I wanted to do was just highlight the changes that were made back in July of 2021. As staff, we write the requirements and we write the ordinances, but ultimately we look to the board to adopt those, and it's our job as staff to implement those. And so with the Cool Springs Transportation Study, they did recommend some changes to our TI, our traffic impact analysis, and then we did present the updated street specifications to the board. The changes that were made, realistically, what they ended up doing was decreasing the requirements that we put on development. And really, to summarize that, to be more in line with national standards, we changed from originally if you hit 100 to 150 peak hour trips, you're required to study a half-mile radius. We changed that to if 100 to 250 peak hour trips, you had to study a half-mile radius. The other one is if you hit, the original requirement was at 150 peak hour trips, you had to study a mile radius. What we did was we changed that to 250 peak hour trips. Again, that was based on the Cool Springs transportation study that was done in national standards, and it was essentially we decreased the standard or the requirement. The other changes that we made was with a lot of intersections that were failing in the Cool Springs area, we changed it from a requirement of having to meet a level service D at all movements to allowing level service E or failure essentially for certain movements, but we still kept the requirement for the overall to be a D, really to spark off-site improvements. The other things that we changed was we added a safety component to it to require a safety analysis because staff was having to do a lot of those after the fact or during the TIA process. We wanted to see that up front with the development. And then the other thing is we require them to look at multimodal improvements and essentially evaluate our comprehensive transportation network plan. And so as these developments come forward, one thing that's important to note is our ability to respond to new development all over the city of Franklin. Why do we have these standards? Some examples of that, are Franklin Parks, for example. When they developed, they had off-site improvements that they were required to do. Ultimately, 2 office buildings got built, and the tenants moved in, and we initially got a ton of complaints about having to upgrade McEwen Interchange. We put together a capital project. We delivered that pretty quickly. Another example is Mallory Green that developed. And if you look at them today, they were required to do improvements at South Royal Oaks, Liberty, and Mallory Lane. And their development is pretty much completed, and we're still working on that. And some of that is because we went from an intersection to almost a linear roadway project with 2 roundabouts has been some of that delay. But the point I'm making is our ability to respond to development all over the city is pretty limited. And so we tend to go through a targeted capital plan with the board, and those are the improvements that we get directed to do. So the next slide I'm going to show is just some examples in the Cool Springs area, in other areas of the city, of where the board has historically required other developments to do offsite. This list, if you look at a road impact fee, there's probably offset agreements. There's probably 10 to 15 other projects out there. But some examples are Carruthers Crossing East is one. That one, ideally, the improvements are directly in front of their development. Carruthers Crossing East was required to do improve Liberty Pike at a cost of about $2.8 million. Iron Horse is another good example. They were required to upgrade Mallory Station Road and Franklin Road intersection. Those improvements were about 0.8 miles away from their intersection or their entrance to their development. Another example is Southbrook. So for Southbrook, that one was about 0.7 miles away. They were required to upgrade Lewisburg and Goose Creek intersection. And for that one, they weren't generating enough impact fees to do it. And instead of us to do the entire intersection, and instead of us piecemealing that intersection with little improvements here and there, what we ultimately ended up doing was giving them some additional impact fee offsets so that they could go in there, disrupt the intersection one time, and get that intersection built out. If you remember, we did that once with TDOT, and then when Southbrook developed, we had to come right back and do it again. And so they agreed, since we contributed the additional funding, to do the full intersection upgrade. Vintage at Watson Glen, that's another example. They doing all the improvements on Royal Oaks Boulevard, and when they come forward with their office buildings, they're going to be required to do some improvements on Highway 96 as well, with the median was what ultimately came out of that. And again, from their entrance, driving along the roadway, that's anywhere from 0.5 to 0.8 miles, those improvements away from their entrance along the roadway driving. So again, the reason I'm highlighting this is, one, I want to make sure the board understands it's very common for us to require developers to do impact or do off-site improvements because our ability of staff to respond all over the city is very, very limited. So what do our TIA guidelines say is really what do we do if an existing intersection is already failed? Essentially, our requirements state that developers are required to upgrade those intersections based on at least their proportion of failure. So the seconds of delay that they have. Ultimately, we do ask them to do more than that so we don't have to go into the intersection 4, 5, 6 times and continuously do piecemeal upgrades to intersections. But they are required to mitigate that, the proportion that they add to it. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Adam and let Adam talk a little bit about the traffic numbers. The other thing I want to just highlight before Adam gets into it, just to be very transparent, is the traffic impact analysis required improvements at 3 locations. Right in front of their development on Cool Springs Boulevard. Looking at those improvements, those are almost all entirely to serve their development. So turn lanes into their development, through lanes into their development, signal upgrades to accommodate their development. For the most part, those do not qualify for road impact fee offset. I believe it's just the right-of-way acquisition that does actually qualify there. The other 2 intersections that reached a failure point is McEwen and Mallory Lane intersection and Cool Springs and Mallory Lane intersection. Given the size of the development, we talked internally, we decided it was appropriate for us to only require them to upgrade 1 out of 2 of the off-site intersections that they are contributing to the failure of that intersection. You have the ability to require them to do both intersections, but we as staff are only recommending that they do 1. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam so that he can run through the traffic numbers.
Paul, could you just say one more time, you said 0.8 miles for Iron Horse, 0.8 for Southbrook, and what were the other 2?
Southbrook was about 0.7 from where their entrance is to the center of the intersection. Iron Horse was about 0.8 miles away from where their entrance is, driving along the roadway to the center of that intersection as well.
And how about Crothers Crossing and East?
Crothers Crossing East was directly in front of their development. They
Okay.
basically had to do the frontage.
And then Vintage?
Vintage was, for the apartments, was about 0.5 miles away, was the farthest improvement. And then the office buildings that they're going to have to do, and I just did a Google Math trace over to it, was about 0.8 over to where the improvements are for the median.
Okay, thank you.
And Eastworks is another great example. Eastworks is about 0.9 miles away from their exit, or their entrance. And they, too, are having to do ramp improvements right there at Cool Springs Boulevard. So the reason we're bringing that up is to show you that it's common, and our ability as staff to respond to every new development is pretty limited. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk about the traffic numbers
Thank
in this development.
Before we move to Adam on the traffic, could I just ask you to go back? You said that the update for the 2 intersections, the first was Cool Springs Boulevard at West McEwen.
Cool Springs at Mallory Lane intersection.
Okay. And what was the other one?
McEwen in Mallory Lane. And we as staff were, we picked Cool Springs in Mallory, we thought was the better intersection to have this development do improvements. But ultimately, it's up to the board.
Cool Springs and McEwen and Mallory?
Cool Springs and Mallory,
Okay.
yes.
So you picked that one out of those 2?
Both of those 2 reached the threshold of requiring improvements. We thought that requiring both was too much for this development, so we required 1, is what we recommend. But ultimately, it's up to y'all.
So that means that you took off to McEwen?
And Mallory.
Correct. So I'm gonna let Adam run through
That's the one that's close by, right? Closer?
I'm gonna let Adam run through the traffic numbers, and then we can certainly answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, so I'll try to answer some of those questions that you just touched on with the development. So this blue circle here is the radius of the 1 mile radius that Paul talked about, the 250 trips, peak hour trips, that is required by TIA guidelines. You'll notice those intersections that we just discussed are in that radius right there. Next slide. So really, one of the things I want to touch on here is the existing failures. So to make it easy, instead of putting A, B, C, D, E, F, which everyone kind of knows, I made it so that if it's green, it meets our standard. If it's yellow, it's got a failing movement, meaning there's a level of service F left turn through something. And then if it's red, the intersection is failed. So it has not only failed movements, but the whole intersection. Here at, that's the whole intersection. So in AM, we only have one that has a failing movement, Aspen Grove and Cool Springs. It has a failing movement. But it meets the criteria, the level service
there it
D, but it's got a failed movement, level service F. In the PM, our existing traffic right now, we actually have failure at Mallory and Cool Springs currently without development. That means the intersection has failed at PM peak. It has also failed at midday, noon peak. We don't study that typically. ITE trip generation doesn't like to do noon studies. So, but we did run the numbers and it has failed at noon peak. If you've ever been out there at lunch, you probably sat there for a couple of cycles to get through that signal.
Let me ask you, so you're talking about that one up there with the red, thank you. You're talking about that one up there on the red, that's the Cool Springs, and Mallory. Where is the actual development?
Blue polygon? It's kind of hard to see because there's some
Above,
blue.
Sure
above
is.
the green circle,
Yeah.
the third green circle from the left,
Yeah.
right above it.
Can you use your mouse to circle that,
It's right above the
just to
three.
show it?
See,
Yeah,
we
right
can,
there.
yeah.
There you go.
That's the optimum.
At the end.
But the others that are going on down there, they're all on McEwen, right? The greens,
Correct. If you go down south,
That
that's
way.
correct, that's McEwen.
and they're all green.
Yes, existing.
Except at north side. I'm going to get to you, Adam, on that.
Yeah.
Okay, but go ahead.
The model says it's level service D or better. All right, next slide. So when we do add the background, there's approximately 10 developments in the background that have not been fully developed. Most of them are at 0% developed. Background means approved development and trips that are obligated. They're there, so we have to add those trips in for any development that's been approved. That's called the background traffic. So background fails a few more movements, not the intersections in the AM. Again, Optima does obviously put some more delay on those, but there's just a few that show movement failure. And then the PMP, next slide. We have Mallory and McEwen, which is down there on the bottom, going into failure. Obviously, Mallory and Cool Springs was already in failure, so it's still in failure, and it increases its failure of delay, meaning queues get longer, delay gets longer, et cetera, as development comes in. So one of the items that we also have that Paul discussed is the safety study. And this shows your crashes that happen at this intersection in the last 3 years. So this is Cool Springs and Mallory. And we picked this intersection to show, just as an example, because it's the #1 location. The Cool Springs corridor in itself is 2.5 times over the statewide average for accidents for a suburban, urban, multi-lane facility. You'll see that those dots represent where the accidents are within that intersection area. We always go back because a few hundred feet in each direction where there's median openings and whatnot to study crashes. So that one had 96 crashes in the last 3 years within that radius. Cool Springs, McEwen had 7 crashes in the last 3 years, so that one's doing pretty good. That's below statewide average. So the recommendations, this comes directly from the Cool Springs transportation study. You'll notice under midterm improvements. Midterm improvements means these are the recommendations to try to get this intersection out of level of service F failure. The main thing I want to point out is it is a triple left. It would be our first triple left in the area. Ironworks also recommended a triple left for Cool Springs and Carruthers northbound from the Nissan headquarters. And so this would be a southbound triple left coming from the Kroger Galleria area, turning left onto Cool Springs Boulevard. We need a receiving lane. We have 3 receiving lanes currently, but how much traffic is actually turning to go on I-65 South, we'd actually need a double receiving lane for that ramp to be able to receive the triple left, to be able to actually mitigate that movement. In other words, the left turn movement is the highest failure. So when we add the third lane, and then we looked at the southbound ramp had a high volume, so we're basically adding another lane. Kind of like what we just did for McEwen and I-65, where we added the second lane to go southbound.
Do we have-
So, go ahead.
Well, since you're on that, room on that southbound lane on 65 to do with another turn lane?
I believe there'd be some grading
There's a
work.
lot of,
Good question.
I think
There's
there's
grading
a,
work that would have to be done.
Yeah, I think there's a-
Luckily, in ramps, there's not a lot of utilities, so we're lucky there.
okay.
Within the interstate right-of-way itself,
If I remember, I think there's quite a bit of room there.
there's a lot of room.
So there should be no problem putting another
Right.
lane in there. Okay.
Yeah, when you get into the interstate ramp work, it's usually a lot easier than it would be the intersection,
Yeah.
just because of the utilities are typically the challenge.
Mayor, may I, while we're on
Go
the
ahead,
subject?
Vice Mayor.
So Adam, you talk about a triple left, and just so I know, basically, if you're in the lane to take that left, Wendy's is right here to your left, correct? So, to me, it makes no sense that, let me rephrase that. So, it's already failing, and you're saying that their development should fix this failure to take this triple, to add a triple left, but their development doesn't even use that triple left.
Yes.
Because you're not going towards their development, you're not coming from their development. So I don't understand the common sense of that.
I'll explain it. So that movement is taking up most of the green time.
Okay.
So their development is actually adding time, more cars, any development adds more cars to other movements which require more green time. So if the worst failing movement is requiring that green time, it's taking away from the movements that they're adding to.
Yeah.
Understood, okay.
So that
'Cause
creates
okay.
a more and more delay, if that makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It affects the whole.
It affects the whole, yes.
Yeah, but I'm like, wait a
So
minute,
if
they're
we
not
got-
even, they're not
Good
even gonna
question.
go
Yeah,
that way.
Absolutely. If we added another left turn lane there, the idea is that we could reduce the green time for the southbound left turn
Heard.
and give the westbound, eastbound left turns more.
Thank you.
And that's kind of representative of this diagram. You'll see in the red box, that's with the improvement. So again, that's increased. Now, it doesn't still meet our standard. Our standard is also D for the entire intersection, but that's all we could do. That's unless we just do some really crazy, flyover type things, and it's not economically feasible to do stuff like that. So we couldn't get it down to an E with 70 seconds of average vehicle delay. And I just wanted to show that. You'll see the other movements, 2031 background traffic, getting close to 200 seconds of delay, which is very high. So, again, to answer your question, I think we just touched on that, is how much delay are they adding for the project?
I just queued you up.
This one actually kind of shows you how much seconds of delay they're adding to the movements right there.
So what are they? We
So
can't
we got
read them,
6
and
seconds
we
of
can't see them on
overall.
our computer.
Okay,
So
6
tell us.
seconds of overall delay for the intersection. Eastbound through, we add 14.6 seconds average delay, and then westbound through is 20.5 seconds of average delay. That's just from the development. That's the portion that they're adding to the Mallory and Cool Springs.
And so what is the delay right now?
The delay right now is, you go back one, existing 2022, for those movements are shown on the far left column there. So we have eastbound through, that's allow service E at 67 seconds, westbound through 67 seconds, it's an E. So they currently meet our standard, and they would follow the failure, not only from the background, but from the project traffic too.
Mr. Mayor, if I could say, after our problems with the computer, we can see none of this. None of this. Even if we go back and go to the packet and look at it, it's not on there. It's not on there.
As I said, we're having some technical issues.
Yes,
and,
we are.
Thanks for emphasizing that, and but we're going to try to do the best we can with the presentations on the board. And if it'd be more helpful for you to move over here so there's better visibility for anybody, we can do
I
that.
think part of it is just being able to study it too ahead of time, but
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going.
That's basically the trip, the generation, level service failure from the project in general. So I'm going to turn it over to Vernon to talk about some of the options.
Thank you,
Uh,
Paul.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Paul and Adam. And a few things I'd like to say before I review the options is I'm frequently and always impressed by the level of thought that Adam and his team give to these types of situations. And Paul and Jimmy contribute to that as well as our third-party traffic engineering consultants. And by this short presentation, I am hopeful and confident that any additional information you want or need to help land on a decision, that you can feel confident that they'll get that for you. The reality is, and that's why I'm involved in this evening, is that as we grow as a community and mature, redevelopment in the Cool Spring area is going to occur. There's a lot of valuable surface parking lots out there that are ripe for redevelopment. And with that will come projects, large and small. And the Optima development has a bit of capacity, as Joey outlined. And in us evaluating the failures that occur or will occur, we're trying to be very thoughtful in what to assign to a project and to provide you options. Also, a fact is that investment in infrastructure in our community is the most costly investment we make. And yes, we require development to do their part in making those investments. And those investments have a direct correlation to the quality of life that attract people to our community. And that shouldn't be lost as I share the options, because really we're trying to simplify the options for you. So allow me to go through them. And I did this with the Planning Commission last month. And hopefully this clarifies where we go and what staff's recommendation is. The first recommendation is, or option, it's not a recommendation, is to have the Optima team improve the intersections at their cost, manage the project and make the improvements, and they would be eligible for the arterial road impact fees that they will generate from this development and they pay. And while I'm on that subject, and I'll use general numbers, that based on the density and the uses proposed for this development, they will generate approximately $1.2 million in arterial road impact fees that will be eligible to go towards improvements. The collector road impact fees will not be eligible, and those will generate about $840,000. Cool Springs, Mallory are arterial roads. The section option is to ask staff to create capital project sheets to improve these intersections in the future and use funding, impact fees, and other funding that we can acquire to make those improvements, and simply have the Optima team improve what's in front of their development, as Paul had mentioned, which is at Cool Springs and McEwen Drive right in front of their development where it's occurring. The third option is don't require Optima to make any improvements to either Mallory Lane, Cool Springs Boulevard, or Mallory Lane and McEwen Drive intersections. They've agreed that those improvements in front of their development at Cool Springs and McEwen Drive need to be made. And as Adam has shown, that the delays in traffic at those intersections will increase. And that's where I want to go back and emphasize this development it increases X amount of seconds. Another development may be smaller, maybe a few seconds less. Maybe the next development larger, generates more delay. The fact is, the improvements to these intersections help mitigate those delays. Will it improve it to an acceptable level of service? Maybe not in every case, or not at all. And then the fourth option, and this is where staff recommends, is to combine the arterial road impact fees that will be generated from the Optima development that they have to pay. As I mentioned, that's about $1.2 million. With other unallocated or non-obligated arterial road impact fees that we have available. That's about $3.8 million that we have available. So if the improvements to the Mallory Cool Springs intersection, as we have roughly identified, to be $2.4 million, staff recommends that you use $1.2 million of that 3.8 to contribute towards those physical improvements and allow the Optima team to manage those improvements. So essentially, not 100%, but almost 100% of the improvements outside of the project management will be covered by the arterial road impact fees they are going to pay, every development pays. And if you decide to put another 1.2 or thereabouts, we'll work those details out towards the project from the unobligated road impact fees that we have available. We believe that the improvements to this intersection will affect a large amount of citizens and visitors that come through that intersection daily, and it's a good investment to make. So, those are the options. And I know that Alderman Blanton, you had said, we're asking the Optima team, staff is recommending that the board consider putting the monetary funds towards it and have them manage the project. We're not asking them to take funds out of their pocket. Hopefully that helps simplify the ask and the recommendation we're making. And if you provide us direction, which we'd like to do because they'd like to keep the project going, we can go back and draft a development agreement. We do need to draft a development agreement that we have partially completed for the work in front of their development at the intersection of Cool Springs and McEwen Drive. They're on board with doing those improvements. As Paul mentioned, only a small amount of the right-of-way is eligible for an offset. So the remainder then would be put towards the Cool Springs Mallory intersection and the on-ramp if you decide to go that direction.
Got Alderman Barnhill, then Alderman Berger, then Alderman Baggett. That's all Bs.
All Bs.
And then Vice Mayor, the four Bs.
So what is the timeline for the city to do it, or what is the timeline for Optima to do it? In other words, you've got a failing intersection now, and if we have the developer do it, when do they start, when do they complete? If the city puts it on a capital improvements project list, when does the city start, and when does it complete?
I'll take a shot at that. First of all, I'll start with the latter. The board has to decide to put that on a capital projects list, that's a recommendation.
Right.
And then prioritize it. Means that we include it in our funding model. If the Optima team does it, we would write that into the agreement to try to balance how their development is generating revenue so they can contribute their fees, arterial road impact fees, and then make those improvements so that by the time they're projected to be completed with their development, those improvements have been completed as well. Because ultimately, we want to partner with Optima, and I should have mentioned this originally. We're very excited that they have complied with our development regulations and land use plan for the development they propose. But it adds traffic. And it also adds pedestrian traffic too, which is a good thing. But, you know, we want to make sure that they're able to complete those improvements in a reasonable manner. It's not, we'll get the plans completed early on, and then we'll work in the development agreement to outline a mutual understanding of the timing of those improvements.
So it's nowhere on your capital
Right.
plans now. It's not in the funded
Not in the funding,
projects.
Not anything in there.
It would need to be identified, it'd need to be funded, prioritized and funded. So it's really uncertain when, if you made it just a city project, when it gets done with all your other obligations. So option 4, the recommended option, gives you a path to use impact fees to pay for the difference, along with what they're committed to put in to get it done in a way that syncs up with the development itself.
Well, I guess my question leans to whoever's in charge should be the group that's able to get it done the quickest. Okay?
Go ahead, Alderman Berger.
I have a question about, okay, they've got their development at McEwen and Cool Springs. We've got development coming east of that, west of them. We've got a couple developments coming in west of them. We've got, I don't know where we are in that process. I can't really remember where everybody is, but what happens, we've got this group putting in their impact fees, and we're asking them to do the improvements, and maybe we throw in the money to help them. Would you say 1.2 mil?
Yeah.
Well, what about the other groups down there developing? They need to be adding money to this as well, and they need to be making these improvements. Maybe they go up and make improvements at McEwen and Mallory, but also, how do we partner with all three of these entities that are working in that specific area, right in that area, from McEwen to McHatcher?
Very good
So-
question.
so they're
And I
all
don't mean my
Partnering in the
Yeah.
dollar signs.
I don't mean my response to be taken lightly, but we go through this same exercise again, is that the TIA, as Adam mentioned, looks at a radius. And each development, fortunately, in the city, pays arterial and collector road impact fees. And we'll be coming forward to you in the next few months to update that model. We have a contract that the consultant Duncan and Associates is working on updating that and those fees. But those developments, when they come back, will have the same discussion. And
they already approved?
Yeah.
Yes.
One is,
Yes.
yes.
Well,
Isn't one?
some of them
Or
have been
both of them?
approved before we completed this work. They still
Yeah.
pay the arterial road and collector road impact fees. And the ones that are up
Yeah.
west on Cool
Right.
Springs, they have been working because there's cross-access that's pretty complex there for several years and
Right.
going back and forth. And we're almost to a point now where they're going to start to make those investments.
Well,
Those
Vernon,
other two
that's-
developments
Go
didn't
ahead.
trigger the 1 mile radius either. They didn't trigger the 1 mile radius based on their peak hour trip volume. They only triggered the half mile radius. So some of these intersections didn't get studied with them because of the
That's
impact
what
they
I'm
were
looking
having.
for.
Their traffic impact study was done in 2016, 2017. They did reduce their density. So the 2016, 2017 traffic impact study that was approved with the entitlements, I believe, they actually reduced them. So we didn't, and again, the radius didn't trigger some of those.
Even though the radius is less, they are also impacting Cool Springs and Mallory. We know that all day long, that they're going to be impacting that. So why aren't we bundling all this together and saying, you, and you, A, B, and C, developer A, B, and C, all those developments along that way. We pull all that together, take a look at the assessment, look at the impact fees, look at all the improvements need to be made, Cool Springs and Mallory, McEwen and Mallory, all up and down Cool Springs, and making our decision based on that, rather than just this entity over here. Because I see all this happening, and we should be making our decision on this whole unit as a whole.
If I may, theoretically, that's very logical, but as we've talked, and using this as an example, those two developments had come in 5 years ago, and we've worked this far. To change on them is something that we take very seriously, is not to add on to what the guidance we've been provided. Now, as you mentioned, Alderman Berger, when we look at perhaps on the east side of I-65 and in that Carruthers area, there's still several parcels that had expressed interest. Some have entitlements that have expired. And when they come in, depending on the timing, we'll definitely do that if we can. But we're also obligated to respond to each developer as they come in and try to have the TIA reflect what best we know, what's happening both currently and what has been entitled that will generate traffic. I wish it, from my standpoint, and I know, probably more from Paul's standpoint as an engineer, we like more exactness to it, but Adam will attest to that traffic studies and the analysis, that's one of the reasons why we've hired a couple third-party traffic consultants that have accumulated the information we're giving them, so they have a broader sense of how traffic's evolving in our community.
Thanks.
Alderman Baggett.
So, but, the slide that showed the background, make sure I understand this. Keep going. It was the one with the circles with the background. So is that showing what is failing? Is this including Optima? Optima plus background?
It's failed existing background and project, so with the project. So it's failed across the board, the Mallory and Cool Springs intersections.
Right.
And so
But I'm
you
just saying
keep
this.
adding that.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is does this picture show me these are failing without Optima,
Correct.
and they're failing
With-
incrementally more with Optima.
Correct.
But they're yellow. If Optima's not there, they're failing. The yellow. I mean, Cool Springs is failing no matter what. Cool Springs in Mallory. But we add the red with Optima with background, right? We add the McEwen and Mallory goes red. With is that right?
It actually goes red with background,
It goes red with background.
just the approved development.
So right now, everything improved, including Optima. I'd be curious to see. This is not including Optima. I think this is including Optima.
The circles wouldn't change color is what I'm trying to say.
So even if we pull Optima out, it's the same
That's
colors.
exactly
Okay,
correct.
that's what I want to know.
Yep.
Because I think it's important to know. I mean, it goes back to Alderman Berger's question, which is we've gotten here where we have failing intersections and we have developments approved. Probably leads to why we're getting this study done to look at our impact fees. I mean, we're stuck with it. So it is concerning to me, though, that I think the option with what was it, 3, where I don't think putting this on our capital project list is going to get this done because we have a lot going on, not because we're not extremely capable and can do it in a quick time if we didn't have all the other stuff we were doing, right? So I think it'd be great to have that on the developer. I think I also think we would like to the developer to manage. I'd also like to see, McEwen and with this study or this option 4 also. I don't know why we don't also need to look at expediting Mallory and McEwen as well in that on option 4, because we've got we're in the boat. And the boat is taking on water, and with what we've already approved. And so further delaying that failure is only going to make someone else who wants to do something else in McEwen peeved when we have to tack on an additional fee. So I think we would be remiss not to go ahead and prioritize that in our capital investment plan, or along with this. I think it's important for the public to remember that we have these fees because this is how we pay for road improvements instead of raising your taxes. And we forget about that. Alderman Barnhill always talks about we want development especially sewer and water, new development to pay for itself. But what's happening here is that's not happening. The city taxpayers paying when we take money out of capital investment, and they're paying for these improvements. And I think it's the general idea of this board that we want to get away from that, or as much as possible. Obviously, there's going to have to be some capital investment. But I think option 4 is reasonable. I do think that there's definitely some work to be done to get this model so we don't end up in this position more frequently in the future, because this area is going to continue to develop. So I think I would lean towards option 4.
Vice Mayor?
You're the first one that's actually made this is what I'd stand beside, so good for you. Just to piggyback on what Bev said, I know timing is everything, and when you consider we've spent a better portion of the last year working through those 2 developments that just got approved, and they weren't a part of this discussion, is unfortunate. I do agree with the fact that it's not fair to go back to them and go, oh, by the way, we've just realized this, and you're going to incur, this massive increase in your investment. However, by the same token, I don't necessarily think that we're being, and I don't want to use the word fair because fair is not realistic, that this one developer who's kind of closing the gap on the development on that corridor is being asked potentially to carry the burden to fix these failing areas that are already failing. I remember years ago when I think it's Windcross, is that correct? We were talking about that light and that signal and how we were going to disperse who paid for that, because would it ever develop across the street? Well, guess what? It is. But I think, in my mind, the just way, we'll say just instead of fair, is to go back and figure out what it would have been to use, and Vernon, it's my favorite thing, proportionate share of investment on this, what it would have been had they been included. So let's say, and I don't remember all the names, I apologize, we've got the 2 developments, now the 3rd, recent. What would it have been had timing been different and they would have helped? Maybe that's kind of where you identify what their investment should be. And I don't know if that's more, obviously it would be less. The other thing I think about is you talk about let them handle the construction project, and then you start throwing in words like I-65 southbound on-ramp, which brings TDOT into the mix and their standards. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but a developer who's doing hotels and buildings is not adept in road work like people who do road work. So I think that we deserve, our citizens deserve the best of the best, which we know is kind of hard to find for lots of different reasons with staffing issues. I don't know that I feel comfortable with them managing a project of something that's outside of their normal prowess. How about that for a word? So do I think that they need to pay their proportionate share? Absolutely. How do we get to what that is? I don't think we're there right here. I think asking them to do nothing is asinine. I think adding it to our capital investment is something that we need to do regardless, because that's making us be good stewards of where we have failing intersections. I think, yes, they have to have skin in the game, but it doesn't need to be a whole body's worth. It's just, it's too much. It's asking the last person that came to the dance to pay everybody else's way that's already in the room.
Can I clarify?
Yes,
We're
sir.
not asking them to pay more. We're asking them to manage that aspect of the project. You're using impact fees to cover the pay more, okay? They're paying what they're required to pay by road impact or offsetting it with work they're doing, and then the balance is being funded by the city
Understood.
with existing impact fees. So the burden you're placing on them is managing 2 additional improvement projects.
That's, but
Okay?
that,
And they're gonna have to hire transportation folks to do the work that's in front of theirs anyway. So they're gonna bring that onto their team regardless. You're adding more to the work plan, if you
right,
will,
but
to
don't,
get done.
But don't we
So-
need to work with TDOT on anything that gets that close to I-65?
Well, and we've done that before. That's not a huge burden. That's something that can be managed, and the folks they're bringing on have that expertise. They're gonna have to do intersection engineering and improvements anyway. This is adding more to that work plan, but you're helping pay for it. That's the, if that makes you feel better about the fairness part, and all those other developments have paid in or contributed to those
Oh,
impact
absolutely,
fees
and I know
that you're
that.
using. So that's the other part of how you're bringing that into play here as well.
And I guess what I'm trying to go back to is when this first even came up, it was like the question was begged, we need you to work on these 2 failing intersection as a part of your condition of approval. And so, sorry, but if my mind goes back to that, this is having options, and I love that we have options that we do frequently in all arenas. But I just, to me, I think there's a little tightening up that needs to be done a little bit. I mean, to make me feel comfortable with selecting an option. So,
I'm going to recognize Mr. Gerst, but I had a question. I think I got a little confused about the massive increase on the other 2 projects. They're not really comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apple to orange because there was a different TIA standard. It was my understanding. And whatever the impact fees are, if they ever bring those projects forward, is what it's going to be, isn't it?
They'll pay their share.
Yeah. And the other question I had was, is anybody here with the applicant tonight?
Yes, I wanted to recognize them.
Sure. Let me go to Alderman Peterson, please. Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
Dollars available. Are any of them prioritize, is any of that money prioritized for whatever we have on our CIP? Or is that in addition to everything that we have on our CIP?
And I conferred with Michael on this. That 3.8 is unobligated. / unallocated. They're not for any CIP projects, so they're available. They've been paid in recently and haven't been incorporated into any of the funding of the capital projects.
So it's outside of what's already in your capital investment program.
So, and I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on then. So, we haven't talked about CIP in a year or so, I guess, or maybe more than that. And so I was wondering, whenever we would be getting back to anything, not that I think that this is not an important place that where work needs to be done at all, but we would just, if we would put the money in from that, then that means that we have put it on the top of our list when it's not
You've
even
added
on the
that
list
portion.
right now.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay. Well, I appreciate the comments that the vice mayor made about the people that are involved in this project are not necessarily ones that do big road projects like this. And so I'm just wondering what that would mean whenever normally I think that the city does something, with that, with a big project. and that it's not required to be accomplished by someone else. I usually think of the city doing something that's that kind of big project.
If I may, I want to echo what Eric said. Numerous developments hire road building firms to do this work. And we see that with all the developments, that there's an expertise to building roads, whether it's in conjunction with TDOT or it's in the city. So companies do that as a matter of practice. They put that on their development team.
Why do we want them to manage it?
Good question, and that's the second point I wanted to make. The expectation is that we're trying to put you in a position to make a decision so we can draft a development agreement and allow this team and future teams to make an investment. However, as one of the options are, don't have the Optima team make any of the improvements. Failure will increase. Or have the city put a capital project sheet together, and then hopefully you'll prioritize it. But with that comes more cost. Because we know that when the city does that type of capital projects, the bids typically come in at a premium. So you're adding time and cost, which then reduces the capacity that we have available. And in this instance, and we don't take this lightly as a staff, to use unallocated road impact fees towards improvements, unless they're going to have a significant impact on a lot of people that visit and work and live in this community, which we feel this intersection does.
So the short answer is you get it done quicker and most cost effectively through this approach. That's why we're recommending it.
Similar to the analogy of why we have Friends of Franklin Parks, because they can get things done a lot differently without the minutia of the government veil.
Still one more.
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson, and then I'll go to Alderman Berger.
Okay, so, and I don't, because we didn't have the presentation yet, how many 2.4 million or more price projects have developers done?
I'd have to go back and we have probably 15 offset agreements. I can tell you Southbrook is one, and Carruthers Crossing East is another, and I know Eastworks is another one that had significant amount.
Okay, but Carruthers Crossing East, wasn't that right there?
Yes, ma'am, it was right
there where they are?
Yes.
Okay, so what about Southbrook?
Southbrook is 2.9 millions. They did Lewisburg and Goose Creek intersection is what they were required to do. And Eastworks is doing additional ramp improvements on Cool Springs Boulevard and
And
Carruthers.
so how much money for that?
I don't have that number sitting right in
Well,
front
see,
of me.
that,
It's more than 2 million for sure.
More than 2.
okay, so say again what that last one was that you were telling me?
Eastworks. They're
But that-
doing
and
ramp
how-
improvements at Cool Springs interchange as well, and they're doing Cool Springs and Carruthers.
And so how close
intersection
are they to
improvements.
that?
They're about 0.8, 0.9 miles. They're
Okay.
pretty far from it. They're
And so,
similar to this 1 mile radius. It fell within it. It's about the same way. Very similar.
and so you're saying that how much are they paying in?
And again, I don't have those numbers. I could look those up
scale
and
of
find
it,
them.
it's
It's just,
And so where have we put money in with someone else?
Southbrook is one that comes to mind where we contributed because again, it's a pretty major
Right.
intersection.
Right,
And instead of piecemealing the intersection together and doing small little improvements here or there, we did the overall improvements.
Right.
Disrupt it once and be done,
right.
is what we like to do. It doesn't always happen, but we try to.
But then they are putting a lot of, a larger part of all the traffic there involved. A bigger piece of it, I mean. Southbrook is doing a bigger piece on Lewisburg and Goose Creek, would you say?
No, I don't know that for fact. I'd have to go back and look. I know Berry Farms had a huge contribution to it. We'd have to go back and look at that.
But Berry Farms didn't pay any, I mean, did not do any work on it, right?
They did do some work, and TDOT did work. We partnered with TDOT and upgraded that intersection in conjunction with Goose Creek, and I do know that Berry Farms did do some work to it. Again, it's been a few years. I'd have to go back and really look at that.
Well, you know, whenever this came up at the planning commission, I went back and looked what we see now are conditions of approval. The conditions of approval on, it says page 19, because I've got to look at the whole meetings work, but it says, per the approved TIA, the following off-site improvements shall be implemented at the site plan stage: Cool Springs Boulevard at Mission Court and the NHC driveway. That's right where they are.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Cool Springs Boulevard at McEwen Drive, project access. It no longer has, as far as I can tell, Cool Springs at Mallory on that set of conditions of approval.
That was presented as far as I know. I'd have to go back and look.
You look at what
Yeah,
we
I'm not-
have tonight on this?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I'm not exactly sure what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And
bring that up.
you're right, and this is the uniqueness of this conversation. And we have been in conversations with the developer, and actually, when we came to the planning commission, we didn't have the final TIA completed with its changes. We do now. So we're really going to make some changes to that development plan, but we know that the development agreement, the road impact fee agreement, needs to travel with the development plan to the board when it gets to that point. And that's the guidance we're looking for here, and we'll adjust the staff recommendation. The plans will come in with the site plan, the improvements, the timing of those improvements, as I mentioned to Alderman Barnhill's question, will be outlined in the road impact fee agreement.
If I
So for-
could,
so if I
I
just-
need,
just
go ahead and
one
you
small-
finish.
small thing.
Let me finish, and I want you to finish what you're doing. But I have two aldermen that haven't said a word, and I'd like to get them included before we go back around again. So
Well-
go ahead, Alderman.
Okay, but as I recall, at one point, both of the two projects that you were talking about were on this must be done in here. But the other question, I guess, is that what has happened to all the projects that have been approved fairly recently? And you know, we're just saying how much money would be coming in from them and those things. And it just seems like, even though this may be the largest additional traffic than the other two that just happened, but it may be 3 or 4 out there. But I'd just like to see what the money is coming in from that, and also how much traffic that they are projected to add to this.
Alderman Hanson?
I can only think of Franklin Road being managed by somebody other than us. When it doesn't matter if you're hiring a road company, we had enough frustrations as a very competent city with highly trained engineers and government leverage that an individual developer doesn't have regardless of who they work with. And ultimately, it's going to come back on us as aldermen and city officials when it's not done correctly or in time, or if they run out of money. I mean, you have to think farther ahead than, oh, this is a nice, easy issue to pass off to the developer and save us millions of dollars in engineering fees and roadwork crews as a city. But ultimately, it could end up costing us more than that on any redos or deficiencies that are there. We have no guarantee, even though this is a solid developer, what if they go belly up? This is not, and
an economy that is for sure like it has been in the past. We have to look far beyond that, and it's much better if we as a city take responsibility for these projects that we already have issues with that we should have been addressing on capital projects prior to this. We have problems at all these intersections, regardless of if anything else goes in there or not. And we're going to continue to have problems until we as a city address these. And it is disproportionately unfair, as Brandy was looking for a unique word as well, to pour it on this person when they just happen to be in the queue at the wrong time. And it isn't just about the money, it's about their responsibility as well. It needs to be on us to take that responsibility for our roads. And we also are initiating signal controls and underground monitoring that will trigger lights to change at certain intervals based on traffic flow, which can help. Based on the MTAS convention that I was just at, supposedly we're phasing out a lot of these vehicles anyway, and we're going to more walkability, more bike riding, more shared, everything other than vehicle operations on these roads, and that's not being taken into account. And then on top of it, we're using electric cars and cars that have self-driving features, which have been proven to reduce traffic fatalities and traffic accidents. So there's a whole lot of other things going on here, and I know that we are doing a traffic study based on what we know now, but we're not looking far enough into the future based on other information that we as a city have received from credible outside sources regarding this. And I know we're even working on alternative transportation in this community to alleviate some of that very issue that we're having. But I can't even wrap my head around a developer dealing with our roadways other than their immediate area and an immediate improvement where their development is. So number 2 is probably the best scenario for me.
Mayor, if I could
Go ahead.
just one clarification. Early on, you mentioned about placing, the responsibility, and if a company was not to be able to complete a project. On infrastructure improvements, the city requires a letter of credit to cover the cost of those improvements. So the money is there. That's a standard operating procedure that's been in place for many years in the city.
Yeah,
So the funds will be available. Paul?
We typically pay for work that is complete, not going to be complete. So we always make sure we're inspecting it, we're reviewing the engineering plans, we're checking the invoices. So we only pay for work that actually gets complete. So if a developer were to go belly up, because it could happen, we wouldn't have paid for it, and we can always step in and do what we need to do as a city, just to throw that information out there.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts, and then I didn't realize we were going to spend quite this much time. Go ahead. I've got Alderman Baggett too, so we're going to try to wrap it up and go to the rest of the agenda and come back later.
Good news, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be very brief because a lot's already been stated that I wanted to say or wanted to ask. First, staff, thank you for putting this together. I'm sorry that, we're not able to see it on our computers. I don't know if it was included in the packet or not, but if I could, I would make a recommendation on the options slide. In the future, if we're going to be provided options like this, I would actually like to see each of those options broken out financially to see what the obligations are for us. Because Vernon, you did a phenomenal job of getting into the details of each of those options, but you're speaking to it. We're trying to see it up there, and it's not included here, and we're trying to take notes. There's a lot going on. With that being said, if you'd take us back to the safety slide for just a second, I have a question for you. And this may be because you did the 1 mile radius as to why the safety concerns came up, but could you just provide some clarity on that for a moment?
For this particular slide or
Yes.
this graphic?
Yes.
So the TDOT has a database of crashes that they
Got
keep
that.
historical crash data. We use that to look at the safety aspects. So for instance, if there's a safety issue around a development, we're supposed to mitigate it. We don't want to increase the amount of density and vehicles to only have more crashes. So that's why we put this together. That's why it's been added to the traffic impact guidelines. So the corridor itself is the whole corridor from I-65 to McEwen. The number one location for accidents is Mallory and Cool Springs, of the Cool Springs corridor.
And not to cut you off, but that's why you made the selection as to this is the intersection that we want to prioritize then.
It is,
And-
it's
and-
just another aspect besides the failure.
Okay, yeah.
Those two together.
All right. So this is one of my greatest areas of concern for years, prior to serving in this role and being involved in our community and having reached out to Alderman Berger over the years about this community even. So if you would take us back to the options slide for just a second. Again, just in brevity, as I see this without all of those details, I actually, at this point today, until provided more details, I would support option number 4. But I would also combine that in with our capital improvements there in option 2. I've got concern because of what you're showing on the safety slide that there's areas that may not be addressed by the developer, and what we're asking, because we're not seeing those details yet, but I want to see how far west, or I guess maybe it's southwest, down on Cool Springs Boulevard that actually goes. Thank you.
Go ahead, Alderman
Yeah,
Berger.
real quick. A couple of things. I've got 2 questions here at the end, but, you know, we do this all the time. Developers build these roads all the time. This is nothing new. And we're in communication with them. So to alleviate some fears, I would say that you're going to be communicating with them. You're going to be communicating with whoever they hire. They're going to be the developer, their contractor, the city, and TDOT. Everybody's going to be in communication. And, you know, the left hand hopefully knows what the right hand's doing. And they're going to be having to contract out and talk to TDOT and manage that. I want to get government out of anything that government doesn't need to do. And if the private sector can do it, let the private sector do it. I'm unwilling to wait. Option 4 is the only option for me because, you know, that makes sense. And we need to move. We need to move on. We have all these projects to do around the city, a lot of things going on. We don't need one more project that we're going to have to go out, bid for, manage, do all that. Staff time across the board makes no sense for us to do that internally. So I would never support anything but option 4 at this point. And those are the reasons why. Now, time is money, and we can oversee that, but taking full responsibility for that when we have done this over and over and over, developers do this over and over, they are paying their fair share. We're chipping in a portion of that, which we should. And if you look at the city of Huntsville, they pay for all the roads. They pay for all the roads. They build the roads, they pay for them. I don't know how they do it, but they do. And the only other thing is, you know, another thing about having them do it, I want to get it done in this decade. And if we look at our options, you know, seriously, look at everything that's on our list. You know, pull out our hair going through this again. We don't want to do that. I can assure you that when it comes down where the rubber meets the road on this one, we don't want to do that. So I think that's the only other comments I had, except for the 2 questions. Well, first of all, Mallory and McEwen, that should be taken care of by the developer that's going in that corner, the Alexander property, well, Parks property right now. So that's going to be developed probably here in the near future. They need to improve that. They sit on that corner. That's their baby right there. And then all the fees from the other 2 developments, are they all spent, accounted for? I want to know where all those fees that they've paid on, where are those in the pipeline? That's all I have.
The 2 developments adjacent to here, they haven't commenced construction yet, so they haven't paid those fees in yet, so they're not
And where are
part of
those
this.
fees going to go?
Well, they'll go in the arterial road.
Which we can
Collector,
use.
yes.
There you go.
For
Thank
future
you very much.
capital projects or
It's a
for
rhetorical
going
question.
through here, yes.
Alderman Baggett.
Really quick and truly quick, but 1 and 3 are out. A blend of 2 and 4 is what I think I'm hearing, which is, and more heavily on the 4. If there's any question as to, from the applicant, as to the quantity of their contribution, and if they wanted to bring that back before us to make a case that it's, what you're asking is too much, then I think showing their incremental impact and how that associates with the cost that they're paying. Like, let's just see it. But honestly, looking at the numbers, looking at the scale of development, and frankly, like, it may be a few $100,000 off here or there. I don't know, but it's not that far off, and it's a big development. It's a big development, and so you all should be able to negotiate that with them. If it gets down, I mean, we're really just talking about, all this other stuff is great. You can talk about the other developments. We're not going to go back and assess fees on them. We can come up with some equation to whatever, like, just negotiate the fee with them. It's proportionate, it's fair, and it sounds like we have the money to do the rest. And then let's get these other intersections on the capital projects sheet, because they're failing and they need to be prioritized, which I think we're in the schedule of doing capital projects anyway. All this other stuff, we could nitpick this. Obviously, we've done it for an hour and 20 minutes. But y'all are doing a great job. And if there is any controversy about the scale of the fee, I guess we can look at it again, but they're going to have to pay for some of the impact. It's a big impact.
All right, I'm going to go back to Alderman Barnhill.
It'll be fairly.
I've heard that tonight, but,
You know it for me. The question here is, the intersection is failing now. If we wait for the developer to do something 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's failed for 3 or 4 or 5 years. I don't think that the development itself changes the color of those circles in it. I think it may incrementally, but I don't think it does. So therefore, I think that what needs to be done here is, this needs to be a capital project probably for on our list. And if we need to go back and prioritize, which we haven't done since 2019, I guess, because that's the last time that I remember doing much on the capital projects list. So therefore, that says, I don't know what their big problem is. I doubt if it's the contribution. I think it's the management of the construction itself, and it being the distance from the project that they're wanting to build to the distance to the road intersection improvements are. But that's just kind of the way I look at it. I think if you've got an issue here, I don't drive through there at noon. I don't drive through there at 4 o'clock. I don't drive through there at 7:30 because I know what it is. But that needs to be corrected as soon as possible if we're going to continue that. And I'm not exactly understanding. You've got project 1 and 2 that's west of this project. They've got to be adding an impact to that besides the optimal project itself. So therefore, if all 3 of those are coming on board, there's got to be some impact from each of those 3 that are going into the intersections now. And when I looked at them, they look like they're failing. They're already at, if I had to drive through it, it'd already be a failing intersection, so.
did the developer want to make any comments?
Mr. Mayor?
And, yes, ma'am.
Just one thing. I'm sort of a realist. I will be very quick. I'm a realist, and I tell you, when I look at this, you all, and I look at us, and I look at putting this on a capital project, and Clyde, you just said you'd like to get it done as soon as possible, bingo, you're it.
That's how you get it.
Because if we do it, it's gonna get on our list, and then we gotta design it, and then we gotta bid it, then we gotta build it. By the time you all get ready, you're gonna build soon, right? I hope.
Okay,
We're gonna
I'm
get this
going to
started.
control the meeting now.
right.
You're I'm going to recognize the developer one more time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mayor. It's nice to be here and enjoyed listening to the conversation and there. You know, I had a whole script here, and every one of you pretty much took my lines in different, order, so I'm extemporizing a little bit, but there are a few points that I think we do want to make.
To give you the name.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Cameron Bean with Flournoy. And I don't know if you can hear me if I'm speaking in here correctly, but when we're describing the impact, you know, our impact at that intersection in question is 1.5%, right? And we spent a lot of time talking about the code, talking about proportionality, and, you know, Vernon shared the code. And I do want to read a part of the code that I think is important right here. Not the TIA guidelines, I'm going to transition to those in a moment. But the municipal code says the road impact fee herein established is directly proportional to the need for new road and transportation improvements generated by new development and reasonably benefits the developer who pays the fee. All right, so to the point Alderman Barnhill was making earlier, these intersections are already failing. They were failing before us. The need for these improvements is not being generated by our development. And it's not, and they're still going to fail whether our development proceeds and gets entitlements or not, right? And that's been our position from the beginning, right? Now the TIA, can we go back to the slide where the TIA, this one right here, CI, in addition to requiring dedication of right-of-way, which to me assumes that we're always talking about a road in front of our property, because we can't dedicate right-of-way a mile down the road, right? But it goes on to say the city engineer and their designee shall require an applicant to construct or fund all or a portion of system improvements required to mitigate the traffic impacts, proposed development proportionate to the traffic impacts, right? Construct or fund, right? The management of these construction projects is not proportional to our impact. The management of the entirety of the construction projects is not proportional to our 1.5% impact on those intersections, right? So we've maintained from the beginning of this conversation that the only way for us to participate in keeping with the TIA and in keeping with the code is by contributing additional funding so that the city can manage this project at what we believe and consider to be very much a public intersection. We're 1.5% of all the background, and I know you mentioned us being a big development, and I'm not arguing that, but I do want to provide the context that of these background developments, there's like, I think 10, or was there 16? 10. There are 10. We're the second smallest of all the 10, right? The smallest would be the ones west of us that recently got approved. We're the second smallest. And Dr. Mayor, to your point earlier about the apples to apples comparison, Eastworks, Southbrook, it's a 245-acre deal. And I want to remind everybody that we're already making $2.6 million of road improvements in front of at our two intersections, right in, right out at NHC, as well as the traffic signal addition, you know, and the additional lanes that are required at our intersections. So I don't want to minimize the scale of construction project we're managing and the investment that we're making at our two intersections. Another very important point that Paul mentioned about the piecemeal effect, if we manage the construction project here and we successfully complete these projects, it only takes it to level E. That's still not the required level of service, D. So you're going to be right back here again. Another developer or the city, right, making improvements beyond the left turn lane, the right turn lane, and the interstate. I've never worked on an interstate, and I do have to say that to some extent it does feel like this is a massive project. I think you guys, you have $3.8 million to do it. You could attract the best road contractor to do this work, and it feels as if you're saying, well, we don't want the best, Cameron, we want you. You know?
Well,
and I'm being funny, but I think it's an important thing to know that if we go through all the construction and management of these intersections, it doesn't bring it to the passing grade. And the same trigger effect for the next developer in line, it's going to be that piecemeal, you know, approach that Paul referred to. Still not going to pass. Still going to be a failing intersection. And it's still going to require greater mitigation, you know, in the future. So
Thank you for your comments, and we need to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
That's good.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Good.
Okay, any questions about the parkland impact fee?
You can let them know I have the paper of the rest of the agenda if anybody wants paper.
Okay, we got paper copies now of stuff. So, So I don't see any questions on the parkland impact fee, so we'll go to Resolution 2022-61 to endorse the Transportation Mobility Policy Guide. Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Alderman. I'd like to introduce Mike Cassidy. He's joining us tonight. He's the chair of the Franklin Sustainability Commission. And Eric Connor is going to provide an overview of the Transportation Policy Guide. I would like to share that in 2020, the Sustainability Commission identified their top 3 priorities: energy, waste reduction, and transportation. So they've been working on 3 policy guides that relate to those priority areas. The Energy Policy Guide was endorsed last year, and now we bring the final 2, transportation and waste reduction.
Thank you, Andrew. Just to clarify, do y'all have what we're talking about?
We do.
Okay. Okay, you just got it. Wonderful. All right. Because otherwise, this would be interesting. So let's get this working. Angie, are you able to patch me in? No, it said it was ready to use in my corner.
Oh, there it is.
The first item.
Yeah.
You had them in order for the rest of the
All of your
meeting.
items
Yeah.
in one packet.
Come on.
This is what makes the board meeting fun. No technology.
We just knew you needed a breather, so we're just giving you a minute.
We appreciate your brief comments,
it's the 7th
right?
inning stretch for you.
That's what they have. They have this. If you were walking through.
Okay, so you know what? Well, maybe it'll show up, maybe it won't. All right, so we'll go ahead and move forward. So the Transportation Policy Guide, the Transportation Mobility Policy Guide that you have in front of you, is one of our more recent policy guides, and it's based primarily on the feedback that we received from our, citizen survey, and the response that we received back from our Walk Friendly Community application that we completed in 2021, I believe it technically was. So we'll walk through this real quick to try to keep moving things along. But if you take a look at the top 3 policy statements on the top, that's the overarching concepts that we're trying to achieve through this policy guide. Number 1, reducing our peak hour travel times here in town. Number 2, to provide a safe and effective multimodal option for transportation. And number 3, to provide safe pedestrian and bicycle connections between residential areas and local destinations. So obviously, if we are successful with numbers 2 and 3, that should, in theory, help us achieve number 1. Rather than running through all of the action items for you, I'll select a few just to kind of highlight. Number 2, these action items just trying to be those smaller goals that we can achieve as a community to help us make progress on those policy statements. Number 2, improving traffic flow on existing streets by utilizing adaptive signalization projects. Number 4, distributing evaluation surveys within 1 year of completing those CIP projects that we were just talking about. Currently, we don't receive any sort of feedback or solicit any feedback on those, so we don't know if they're actually successful in doing what we hope they are doing, unless someone comes forward and is like, hey, you know, this intersection is still really bad. So we would like to go out and actually solicit feedback on those. Number 5, increasing youth engagement citywide and encouraging local schools to establish a Safe Routes to School program to ease peak pickup and drop-off traffic. I'm sure, as all of you know, on days like today where they're on fall break, it's much easier to get everywhere than on days that, you know, there are lots of parents dropping kids off. So if we had some sort of other options to try to encourage students to get to school another way rather than standing or sitting in the drop-off line. That would help everyone. Number 6, increasing public knowledge of the available multi-use paths and trails through mapping and outreach, just ensuring that the knowledge is there so people utilize those other options that they do have here in town. And number 9, increasing the sidewalk and multi-use trail connectivity across Franklin. So when we do educate everyone about the available trails and sidewalks that we have in town, we want to make sure that they can actually get all the way to their destination rather than it dead-ending somewhere. So just those are a few quick highlights on the action items. One of the commuting stats that you'll see here further along on the page that I just want to highlight as well is that we have approximately 10,000 citizens that live and work in the city of Franklin, and 80% of them commute by vehicle alone. So even if we were able to reduce that number by 10%, whether it be through carpooling or getting to work some other way, that's 1,000 vehicles off the road in the morning and in the afternoon at peak travel times. So that would obviously, help everybody else out that doesn't have the option to carpool or get to work in another place, but just help alleviate some of those peak hour travel times. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to take extra time to look at those action items closely at your leisure, as well as just some of the stats that we put together for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
You've done a very thorough job, it looks like, Eric.
So we will,
Mike, we're glad you're here, too.
It used to be we used to have like 50% left the city, and 50% came in. It was very close to that. It was, I used to hear that all the time at these conferences and stuff. They said we had probably an equal amount of people leaving and coming, and, for a while. I don't know how many years that went on, and I see now it's 60,000, 66,000 people work in Franklin but come from the outside, and 23 live
I think
here,
the number you're
work out.
referring to is actually the in and out of Davidson to Williamson, rather than the total number that come into work. And that flow is about equal back and forth.
Yeah.
From Davidson to Williamson, Williamson to Davidson is
Yes,
the number.
correct.
And I think this is a little different.
Yeah, well, still in and out, the amount, so it was interesting. It's just interesting to find there were 66,000 people that commuted from outside the city to come here.
and those numbers are current. That comes from the Goose Creek Coordinated Study.
Yep. It's a
And the
lot.
consultants for that. So those numbers are
A lot of people
2021,
coming in.
2022 numbers.
Can we move on to Resolution 2022-62 to endorse the waste reduction policy guide?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, waste reduction is one of the 3 priorities from the commission, and I'll go ahead and read the 3 policy statements. We seek to promote the existing waste reduction programs that we already have, improve upon those. And then number 2, new opportunities should be evaluated that would further waste reduction efforts. And then number 3, which is just kind of an ongoing thing, is litter along streets and waterways should be monitored and collected promptly. There are 13 action items, and they generally relate to those 3 policy statements. We did present a draft of these at the August 9th BOMA work session, and at the following Sustainability Commission, the commission did vote to unanimously approve both policy guides. They did add 2 action items to this one. They added Action 1, which would establish improvement objectives to help measure all of the action items, to kind of underpin all of the action items. And then also action number 13, which involves creating partnerships with local companies to support waste diversion efforts. I can stop there.
I just might make a comment that I was on a call this morning, and the mayors in the region are joined together along with TDEC and the legislature to form a strike force specifically focused on solid waste in our region. So the plans tentatively right now are have a summit late January, but I know that next week that 15-person committee, which is going to include private sector, businesses, it's going to include maybe a legislator, it's going to include Commissioner Salyers from TDEC, some mayors, and so and also solid waste directors. So it's going to be a very broad-based task force that's going to be looking at this. So I applaud what y'all are doing, and also the fact that our community has been doing a good job with recycling. So I applaud that. You know, I think when we look at the numbers, they're exceptional.
A lot of us have a lot more in the blue bin than we do in the other.
So,
I'd like
question?
one thing, because I was on the Sustainability Commission for a little bit, I think it's important that we as BOMA consider on some of these initiatives funding allocation, and because some of them are actual items. And so being on a commission where you propose items and policy guides and then not having hurdles to get. Now, I'm not talking about the bigger ones, but like if there are some low-hanging fruit, or if there's something in discretionary that the city administrator could allocate on an annual basis to help with some of these, I think it would help energize the Sustainability Commission and all of our commissions, frankly, and give them something to go out and achieve once we have a policy guide that we endorse to take steps. So I would ask the staff to think about that in maybe next year's budget, to having that. So when those commissioners come in, they have, we have something we can, grab hold of and do, and have some funding there, instead of having come through us for, Civil War Commission had to come for like $10,000 for the sign, which is, but I think please staff consider that in next year's budget.
Ready to keep moving?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good job. Appreciate y'all coming. Item 6 is proposed water and sewer impact fees. This is kind of a continuation of where we've been. I think you've all got that in your packet now.
So yeah, as you indicated, this is a follow-on to the multiple discussions we've had and we had last week, and I think there's some desire for some additional discussion. I think we've got a few things to add and to come back to you on. Some of which you've seen before, some of which is a little tweak or addition from what we shared in previous presentations, and then take your guidance on what else you need and how else you want to move forward in discussing this update of these fees. So, Michelle,
Yeah,
take it
so
away.
we pulled together, based on some feedback that we had from the last meeting, we pulled together just a couple of slides. It's not going to be a very long presentation, so we can just go through those. Brian and I are going to work through some of these, and then we can open it up for some discussion if there's some.
I don't think we're going to do that tonight. Oh, I'm sorry. We're getting instructions to each other. We're not going to get to item number 11, not because of you, Michelle.
Okay, I'm sorry.
On the first slide that's in front of you, this is an example of actual buildings that are connected to our sewer system in the city of Franklin. And the whole purpose of this is we're wanting to show the inequity currently with these facilities and the impact fees that are in place now. Building A and Building B, they were businesses of like occupancy groups. One was a square footage of X, other one was twice the size. They paid the same impact fee. And under the new methodology and new cost for the sewer, that would be the cost differential that we were asking for. The same thing with Building C and D, two facilities in the city limits of Franklin on our system, comparable use groups. One is square footage Y, 5 times bigger. They both pay the impact fee the same amount, and those would be the cost with the new price, new proposed cost of the impact fee. Just showing that based on that size of that facility with the common use groups, that we are essentially, the fees increase relative to the size of the facility.
Yeah, so kind of from that last example, a building 5 times the size is paying the same impact fee. It doesn't have the same impact to the system, right? It is a massive impact. It's a large, sewer demand on the system.
Because it's the meter size.
Yeah, so it's currently based on the meter size, right? So it's using the same meter, but it's a higher demand. So that was the highlighting of that slide.
And another thing I'd like to point out as well, we have multiple water utilities that serve Franklin residents. So if a development occurs outside of the city of Franklin's water utility, we have really zero input on the size of the meter that gets installed. So that's another key piece, and a lot of the commercial development we see does occur outside of our water utility. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, so the next couple slides are, we were also asked to kind of show what the proposed impact fee would be, so of a 300-unit apartment complex. So this is not a building that we're comparing it to in the city. We were just asked to kind of show that. So we did. So I did 100 one-bedroom homes, 100 two-bedroom homes, and 100 three-bedroom homes. And so you can see from that table that those all have different demand factors. Right, so we're accounting for, obviously, a three-bedroom home, was going to be the largest. It's almost, essentially a single-family home, whereas the one-bedroom home is not going to be contributing that demand to the system. So those are vastly different. We go to the next slide. It's about 257 single-family units. So if you think about a 300 apartment complex, we talked about a ratio of that size when we started this discussion. And then, so the next slide is where I just summed the fees for that. So it's obviously larger than the current impact fee that we would have now, but when you look at that cost on a resident basis is not that significant. We'll go to the next slide. So this is one we had also wanted to talk about as well. So as you know, home prices in Franklin are continuing to rise. The average home price is about $950,000. And when you look at this and compare it to the impact fees, it's about, 0.4% of the water impact fee is the water impact fee, and 1.9% of that is the sewer impact fee. So, really, this is a small investment that we're asking growth to pay for, to pay for growth, right? That happens. So it's not it's not a large investment of the home price. The next slide is, so we ran there was some discussion at the last meeting about what it would look like for impacting regular rates. And so if we chose to not increase the impact fees to ask growth to pay for that, we would have to have that money on the ratepayer, right? And the calculations that we have show that it would be about a $35 increase on sewer rates per month. And that's in today's dollars, right? So we continually have to increase rates each year because it gets more expensive to treat water. So this is not accounting for that rate. So it's about $35 per month and about $420 per year to just the average, I think 5,000 gallon customer, 5,500 gallon customer. So typical single family usage. We were also asked in the last meeting how affordable housing would be affected. And after some research, which this is not necessarily the water department's, not my lane, but we talked with our BNS department, and actually water and sewer impact fees are included in Title 21 of the municipal code right now. So we already have that structure set up to provide some offsets for those impact fees. And I think the last bullet is where the general fund would make an offset to the water department for those fees in that respect. And then obviously it would, the housing development would have to apply to all of those housing, the affordable housing guidelines that are set up by BNS. So kind of, going back to the recommendation that we have, just wanted to share these couple slides with you. You have them in your packet. So the water and fee we're recommending to increase to $3,600. The sewer fee recommending to increase to $16,700 to pay for that, to take that fee off of the homeowners that we see, the current rate users. And so this next slide is just the timeline that we would be looking at, potentially implementation probably sometime early next year. So not by the first of the year, because there's a lot that we would need to get in place for that. But did want to just outline that for you. So is there any questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Mayor?
Go ahead. I'm looking at November the 2nd, which,
I think we need to bake in a little more time here, because I think it's gonna, I think there's a, I think there's a lot to dig through here. Let me first start by saying, is that I am 100% confident that everything proposed here is going to deliver on the end goal, which is funding our new water and sewer plant. And I have no doubt that that this is more equitable than the current system, for sure. And so don't take anything I'm saying as, I mean, you were tasked to do one job, which was to back into the, how do we pay for future improvements that we think we're going to need. I think what I'm feeling, and I think what I'm hearing in the public is that there may be some unintended consequences. And from residential folks, I don't think it's really as big of a deal, because if you look at your percentages, it's probably easily absorbable. I think I think the impacts are going to be, I mean, frankly, we've got someone here that wants to build 350 units, and he's looking at a $4 million extra cost. And we just spent an hour and a half talking about $1.7 million, you know, and we're wanting to up it to, you know, and so, $3.5 million. I don't think this is going to go over well and I'm not talking about people's feelings in the development community. I'm talking about just, frankly, I don't think it's going to go over well for the community, because we're going to see some adverse impacts. And I don't know what those are. And I don't know that it's your specialty to know what those are, right? You've been tasked with, you can't sit here and tell us, well, this is what's going to happen in development if we do this. You've been tasked with what you've done and done well. So I just have a lot of hesitation until we get a better grip on it. I had some great conversations with the city administrator about this, and I think we're all on the same page where it's a complex problem to tackle, and how do we get there? I'm very nervous about some of the unintended. Again, the single family. I think I think that would be absorbed, and you'd think, oh well, that can be absorbed, so maybe it can on commercial too. Well, I don't think that's really. I don't think that translates, because in some cases you'll have the cost of this would be a significant piece of the cost of the land that people are buying to develop. I mean I mean those numbers are high. Sure. Not saying it's not what's needed to get to where we need to go. Those are my comments, and I don't know that I'm ready to vote on something in November on this. I think there's a lot of discussion in the community, development community specifically, about this. And I would just, it feels a little bit, I just don't feel settled on this. But it's not because of you all. You all have done your job. You've done exactly what you've been tasked to do, and done fantastic. So I think we've got a broader decision to make, which is how big of a plant and how we pay for it. And
Alderman
we kind of
Potts.
have to answer this question first.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. First, I know you guys put countless hours into all of this, and as Alderman Baggett just said, you did your job, and you did it more than just well. You did it great. You really laid it out the way that we needed to see it here. A lot of the area, I like to say that this is going to impact is going to be Ward 3. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hypersensitive to this. I'm hypersensitive to the balance of the decision that it's going to take, and partnering with staff and partnering with all that currently reside in Ward 3, and with the growth and the commercial growth that's going to take place in Ward 3. So I do need additional time. I have reached out. I got a couple of examples, and in Berry Farms, I reached out and asked Boyle. I said, can you give me an idea? Just give me an idea right now of how this would impact you. And so Berry Farms Town Center Phase 1 mixed-use project, the fee that they actually paid for water and sewer, and I'll give you this stuff later. Water sewer fees to permit the project was $1,999,616. And according to them, with the new proposed fees, using the new methodology and the updated fee structure, it would be $5,952,565, which is an increase of $3,952,949. And then I said, okay, well, let's take it to the next phase. Tell me more about that. And so Berry Farms Town Center, this was one town center, this was their office building. And they said that the fees that they actually paid for water, sewer fees to permit the project was $81,328. The new proposed fees using the new methodology and the updated fee structure would be $1,934,415. Now, that's an increase of $1,853.87. Have to validate. I always trust but verify. That's the information that they gave to me. I want to give it to you because I want to verify that. We need to pay for our water and sewer requirements there in Ward 3. There has to be a balance, and I am concerned not with necessarily the residential side, because I think that your slides speak to that, and I think it could be absorbed reasonably well. But it is the commercial component of this is, and my bigger concern is, are we putting all of our eggs in one basket right here and relying on what we think is going to be the growth there in the Ward 3 area to pay for all of this? Or how much of this is going to be funded by money that we already have in our budget for capital improvements? And so I need to kind of see, where our balance is. And so I'll share this information with you, and I'm receiving, probably just like other aldermen, I'm receiving, information from others that maybe you haven't already received, and I certainly want to be very transparent in all that I receive. But again, super appreciate all the hard work you guys are putting out.
Alderman Berger.
Not only do we need more time, but I think this is a huge decision we're making here. I think we need, we've not heard from the stakeholders here on this at all. I've reached out as well, and I think some of us on the board have reached out. We've had a few people reach out to us and have really great concerns about this. So I spent some time reaching out to people and asked for some numbers as well. I got those as well, Jason. And, I asked them, I said, is anyone talking to you all? And they said, no, we're not part of the conversation. First of all, there's a couple things I think we need to do, and I think it would behoove us to do this as a board and as an administration, is to take the stakeholders. We should have a separate meeting with the aldermen, and then we need to bring in the stakeholders. We need to hear from them. We talked to an economist about this. We looked into that as well. There are people out there that are very astute to this outside, and there are people doing this all over the country. And what other research have we done with that? Because I think that we need, there also, I think utilities come into play here as well at some point. But how do we fund this? I mean, is it only fees? Is there, I don't know, is there some kind of crazy idea about a TIF district or any kind of districts we could do with something like this? I don't know if that exists for what we're looking at here. I don't know. I'm real uncomfortable with this because those are astronomical numbers. That's, to me, it's unsustainable. I don't know how that's sustainable. I don't know how that's sustainable for anybody. And I know we have developers right now, commercial developers, waiting to, on the dotted line, sign with their new people, their new buildings and everything, and they don't know what to do. Because they said if we sign and this all comes through, and then we jump from 81,000 up to, 2 or 3 million or whatever that number was, I've got it here. That's unsustainable to them. They wouldn't be able to do that. They would be between a rock and a hard place for sure. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. So it's, I think we deserve to have a focused meeting on this, and I think the stakeholders should be here, and I think maybe some other players that would be here would be helpful. And I think, invite the commercial and the developers and even the home builders somewhat. I think there should be some communication here.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Alderman Barnhill, and then I'll go to the vice mayor after
Okay,
that.
it's a matter of who pays. either the person living here now or the person that's moving in. The company is here now or the company that's moving in. Now, that's the bottom line. I don't know about, there's 85, I guess it's 85, 86, 87,000 stakeholders now that are looking to us to make sure that they don't have their rates increased to compensate for the future growth that's being here. And, you know, I'm shocked at the $16,700 something for a sewer for the rate. But the bottom line is, it's either us paying it now or us paying it later. And I don't think I'm gonna agree to somebody that's already living here paying it later. And the other thing is, make sure we understand make sure that all of us, and I think you do, understand that this is an enterprise fund. It is not going to sales tax. It is not going to property tax. It is not going to a road impact fee. It's not going to any of those to support it. It's going to your water rates, sewer rates, and the impact fees that you charge water and sewer to support the water and sewer department. And that's the bottom line. So don't, you know, if you start thinking you're going to pay for it with an increase in property taxes or an increase in something else, ain't gonna happen.
Vice Mayor?
Okay. No, I was kind of in.
Go ahead, if you're.
Because that's what I said last meeting, is that this would raise, that we would have to, this fee would affect development. And guess what? They wouldn't develop their project, and guess who would have to fix Cool Springs without their fees? And that would be the city taxpayer. And so the consequences of slowing and stopping development altogether will cause us to have to fix those intersections without the developers paying their fair share, because they're not going to do it.
Well, you can argue any way you want to on something like that, but they're adding 1.5%. The discussion with that doesn't relate back to, it doesn't relate back to the fact that the fees pay for the water and sewer, and it's a separate enterprise fund controlled, and you're going to do it, you're going to operate in the black according to the state. If you don't, they're going to come in eventually and take it over and run the department themselves. Now, I hope that doesn't happen. I know Davidson County was threatened with that a year or two ago.
No, it's fine. I just want to say that I don't really think, well, I would not support the increase on the residential people either. I mean, we think $35, and that equates to $420 a year. There's a lot of people that's, I mean, yeah, we're a wealthy community and we've got lots of influx of other people who think we live really inexpensively. There is a generation here that is striving to get by, and $420 a year makes a big difference. We had done some, I don't even know what you want to call it, on some of the areas that did have that demographic, where we kind of grandfathered them into some of the fees, and I think this is kind of going down that lane. I know for my house, I mean, when you take water and you take wastewater, what used to be $40 is now $100 and something. So you throw that on top of that, I'm looking at water and sewer that's almost as much as electric, and that's lopsided.
Okay, can we move on to item 7? Contract 2022-0208, an agreement with Fourth Avenue Partners Franklin LLC for reimbursement of costs for domestic water distribution system improvements.
So this one is just a standard reimbursement offset reimbursement agreement. The total cost of the improvements the property is on actually the corner of Fourth and Front. I'm sorry, Front and Margin. I'm sorry, Fourth and Margin. I can't get my streets correct. And they need to connect in order to get appropriate fire flows. They need to connect to that main along the water main along Hillsborough Road. They've got to extend the main. It was determined through actual field investigations that main is not 8 inches like we thought it was. It's 6 inches, so there's got to be some modifications. So because of that, the water department is offsetting that by half. So it'll be the 82.5 will be the water, and then the 82.5 will be the developer who would had to extend that main anyways.
Did the city, I'm sorry, Mayor, did the city pay for that to be an 8-inch, the as-built? Was that in the contract, was this, the contract that, did they, the city pay, was the contract when that 8-inch or 6-inch actually, did the city pay for an 8-inch and get a 6-inch?
I am pretty sure, yes. I don't, that was a little bit,
You're pretty sure we
I'm
did
pretty
pay
sure,
the
yes,
contractor?
I'm pretty sure it was, yes, and it was accepted.
This is a
in
very
paper, that was
important, this
that.
is an important question, because, and if the city pay the contractor for an 8-inch, we got a 6-inch, I would like for us to go back to the contractor and, because now we've got a building owner who's paying half, and the contractor got to put a 6-inch in, and when he should have put an 8-inch, we paid him for an 8, and got a 6. So I think,
Well, the building contractor would have had to extend their main anyways. So the only part, so they would have, that
sure,
was anyways.
but it was going 8 to, but now they're having to do an 8 all the way. They're having to replace the 6-inch that is there that was supposed to be an 8.
No, there's a 6-inch stub out right there. So from Hillsborough along to Margin, there's a 6-inch stub out. We thought it was an 8-inch. So they needed to take the main and extend it from their property to that stub out anyways.
Right.
So they're extending it to 8, and then that
So,
little stub out they're replacing.
but they're gonna not, okay.
If that makes
Still,
any
I'm
sense.
it does, but I do think there was,
There's a little bit.
there's a little bit of a
oversight that was
we can talk
miscorrect.
offline because we've gone off, but I'm curious to know about that. But I support this.
Any other questions? Do you have a comment
Yeah,
on
just real quick, if you don't mind. 'Cause I know it's going along already, but
Mike Hathaway?
Mike Hathaway with 906 Studio. We're owners in the building as well as tenants of the building, so we're happy to be here and happy to be part of Franklin. Our only conversation here is that we designed this based on the as-built. The as-built stopped at the edge of Hillsborough. We put in an 8-inch line all in North Margin, so we've expended that cost that other people are going to benefit from as well. So we're just asking what we think is just and equitable is for us to be reimbursed 100% for that, because it wasn't our mistake, I don't believe. So we would ask that we'd be reimbursed full.
Yeah,
for that.
so Ben McNeil is actually apparently watching this video while he's on vacation. So he just texted us, so we paid for a 6-inch, it was called for a 6-inch, for some reason the as-built labeled it as 8-inch.
The as-built was wrong, not the
They
construction.
designed off of an 8-inch,
Yeah.
so,
So this is just
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that comment.
We are. I think the proposal is 50% reimbursement. We're just asking for 100% because it wasn't an issue of our design.
Well, but the reality is there's a 6-inch there. It needs to be an 8-inch. And what we're proposing is to split that cost.
So an 8-inch to accommodate their fire flows that they needed for their development.
Right.
That's what the difference is. That's what we're reimbursing.
The fact that the as-built was wrong is unfortunate, but the reality is the 6-inch needs to be an 8-inch. They require it for their development to work, and we're offering to pay half of it, which is,
The as-built wasn't their fault.
but it doesn't matter. It is what it is. It's 6 inches. It was 6 inches.
how's that
They
work?
thought it was 8.
How does that work?
So it needs to be increased in size, and we're offering to pay half of that cost to increase the size. They pay the other half. Just because the as-built was wrong doesn't change the financial
What had to happen.
responsibility. Does that make sense?
I think this is okay in this or it's not okay. It's $80,000 in this situation. It could be argued that if another developer who had a $3 million impact when they were working with a wrong as-built, we probably wouldn't want to come back and split half. I mean, that would be a bigger issue. So I think that's the philosophical bigger issue. I think they would have had to have done this anyway. They're getting it at half off. So that's a good, they just didn't know about it on the front end.
They're kind of getting a deal because the as-built was
It was
wrong.
8 or assumed it was 8?
They assumed it based on an as-built, correct?
I don't know what you're talking
Could I,
about.
please?
Sure, go ahead.
I want to caution the way this discussion is going, because if we, and we are very clear that the development community is not to rely on our GIS maps and as-built drawings, because it's not exact enough, and we're a growing community. So we advise that they go out and do borings to confirm what's in the ground and where it's located. And that's the only exact way to find out what exists, particularly in older part of communities. Now, we are trying to be more diligent in how we review and assure as-built are accurate. And for the most part, it works out well. But there are those instances in which the as-built are not reflective of what's in the ground, or they're dated. And the only true way to know what's in the ground is to do some borings and confirm before the design is made, which adds a higher cost. But we're being equitable here, and from time to time, we'll come back to you with this type of scenario. It's unfortunate, but we want to be sure that developers aren't relying on GIS maps that are evolving in accuracy over time.
Okay, so I have a question. So if we advised them that it was 8-inch, but did we also advise them, Mike, did you know, or have you been told, or were you asked, or did you have knowledge that you needed to go out and bore? I'm just curious. I just want to know.
No, I'm not sure we would bore in the middle of Hillsborough Road. We were just informed that based on the as-built, it was an 8-inch line. We were required to install an 8-inch line for the fire sprinkler power or
Yeah.
pressure. So I'm not sure why a 6-inch line was installed. If they were requiring us to create an 8-inch, obviously you can't go from a 6-inch to an 8-inch
Yeah,
to
see,
maintain
that-
the pressure, so.
That's
the only question
That's
that
the only
we
thing
have.
that bothers me, because you're required to do the 6-inch. I mean, 8. And it was 6-inch, but you're required to do that, but you're not gonna bore in the middle of a road. I just don't know how all that works. It just sounds, I mean, is it okay that they go out and bore in the middle of the road?
Sure, we'll work
Okay.
with them on that.
You could
And do they know-
videotape it too.
Do
You
they
could-
know to do that? Do you all know to do that? I mean, seriously.
No, I don't know that we.
Yeah,
we would
I'm,
assume-
yeah, let's
All right,
move on
I
from
know.
that.
It's
I know.
pretty
It's
standard.
not unusual.
Oh, I do feel it's unusual. I hope
It's
this
not,
doesn't happen
but
all the
it's not.
time.
Item 8, which is a procurement award, it's recommended that this be rejected, so I think that's the only
You will see
comment
that
that needs
next
to be
time,
there. Then title, ordinance 2022-36 is to amend Title 15, Chapter 6, Section 15-615 of the Franklin Municipal Code relative to public parking lot garages to prohibit loitering in the city garages, and to amend Appendix A to add fine for violation of loitering in the city garages.
Does this include skateboarding too?
Skateboarding's already not allowed.
Yeah, this is specifically about people hanging out and being involved in activities, especially on the top floor of our 2 parking garages. So this would help us be more specific about that.
Yeah, it's a nice party spot for teenagers, and we need a little bit more teeth, I think, to get them off the top.
Can we exclude the 4th of July? Because a lot of citizens go to the top of the garage for the fireworks.
I think with that comment.
I don't think that's our problem.
We're going to move on to item 10, which I'll briefly describe. Item 10, which is regarding use of 53 acres of city-owned property near Mackhatcher and Spencer Creek. Some of the board members may remember that a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, we sent out a request for proposals for the water sewer property that's on Mackhatcher. And eventually,
Yes. 6, I think, yeah.
so anyway, the question is, we've had a number of people that are apparently still interested in that property. And so the question to the board would be, is the board interested in asking for requests for proposals again on that particular property?
So really before we invest time and effort, do you want us to bring to you a process that you can approve? And then we would implement that process if you're comfortable with it? Okay.
Okay, we'll be back in about 10 minutes.